Hi, I'm Elaine Boddy and welcome to the Foodbod pod, brought to you in partnership with Matthew's Cotswold Flour and Shana's Sourdough. In this episode, we thought we'd do something slightly different. On this occasion, it's just me in my kitchen. So I will be cooking some things for you later, typical of the kind of foods that I like to make. But before then, I thought I would just give you maybe a bird's eye view into my cupboards and the things that I have as a standard, my staple provisions, I guess. I don't know if you're like me, whether you have favourite cupboards in your kitchen. I do. My baking cupboard is very much one of my favourites, but also the cupboard that I'm looking at right now. And in this cupboard, you've got some of my favourite foods. So we've got lots of nuts. Oh, nuts I'm a huge fan of. So we've got some roasted, unsalted nuts. They're brilliant. I don't want salted personally, but I like roasted nuts from Costco. They're really nice. But also some roasted and chopped unsalted peanuts, which are really good for adding to things. And a lot of the things I have in these cupboards are things that I would add to porridge, or I would throw over a salad, or I would have with some yogurt, or any meal really. If I'm having a warm vegetable meal, often I will throw some nuts or some seeds over them as well, because as a vegetarian, it gives you the protein, but also it gives you a crunch. So I've got lots of whole nuts and the chopped nuts, and then an array of seeds. I have golden flax seeds, I have poppy seeds, I have sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, linseeds, sesame seeds, also some black sesame seeds. And these are all useful, again, either on my foods or often they end up in my bread. I also have some dried barberries, which are a Middle Eastern product, which are they're little dried berries that give you the kind of sour tang that you would get typically in Middle Eastern recipes. So they look like they're going to be sweet, but they're not. I have some za'atar, which is Mediterranean Middle Eastern herb mix that has often gone into my bread, often also goes over my vegetables. I have a whole fabulous selection of handmade chutneys from the very brilliant Lush Larder, which are mine and mine alone. I guard them. I guard them very well. Just like I have a selection of Manolife peanut butter. Best peanut butter, in my opinion. Always crunchy for me. Again, I guard them very carefully. And I try not to just stand here and eat them with a spoon. And alongside them, I have my grains. I have some uncooked grains. I bought these recently so that I had them to show in a class, but also I use them in other ways. So I'm going to cook some later and use some in like a warm salad to show you a different way of using them. I have a variety of very dark chocolate. We only eat very dark chocolate, my son and I. So there's some dark chocolate little pellets here, which he will put with yogurt and granola and berries. I have some really dark chocolate discs for the odd occasion that I fancy something. And this is very much a cupboard where I will open and go, oh, the joy. Obviously, I'm in England, so there's also Marmite. I also have a cocoa stick, which is something you might have heard Cherie talk about on one of our previous podcasts. It's a solid stick of packed cocoa that you can grate over things. It's a very cool thing. I then move on to cupboards next to me. This is one of my other favourites. Well, let's just be honest, I like food, so I have many favourite cupboards in this kitchen. But this is my spice rack, spices and dried herbs. And here for me, a couple of my real standards that I like to use a lot. I have smoked paprika, I have pull biber or Aleppo chili flakes, which either one you want to call it. And they're lovely because they give a nice amount of heat without being too strong. Enables you to control the heat in a meal. I have got roasted ground cumin. I'm a big cumin fan, like it even more when it's roasted. I've got whole cumin seeds, whole coriander seeds, ground coriander. I have got ground ginger. And then in amongst those, I do also have some mixes. I have a Cajun spice mix that I've made. I have an Indian spice mix. Majority of these I've made, but I do also have some that I have bought. I have something in particular that we like to put on a load of stuff, which is a bravas mix. And it's based on bravas patatas, I guess, which is a Spanish dish. And we use it for roasting potatoes, and it's got salt, garlic, sweet smoked paprika, cayenne and oregano in it. And it works beautifully on potatoes. I also have here a jar of sumac. Amazing stuff. Again, you have the slight sourness that comes with Middle Eastern products, and sumac is a berry, so it's another dried berry that's been ground to be able to use over dishes. On the other side, I have various things. I also have some allspice and cinnamon and nutmeg, things that you might use more in cakes. Obviously, I use everything in bread. I do have some dried herbs. I'm more of a spice person, but I do have some dried herbs. Particularly, I've got some dried chives, which are lovely in your bread. And I have a recipe coming in my new book with dried chives and red onion and some focaccia. Oh, it's so good. I do have some spice mixes from my very favourite spice kitchen. Some tandoori masala, another Cajun spice. I have a jerk spice mix. And these things are often used on vegetables for me, but often on meat for my husband and son. So a lot of things go on chicken. I have some everything but the bagel seasoning that my friend bought me from America. Also, that she recently gifted me from America, this Flatiron Pepper Company mix, which is dried and ground roasted garlic, jalapeno and toasted red onion. It's very good. We have some Calabrian chili peppers, and we have a truffle parmesan and black garlic mix. They're going to be interesting to try. I've got various balsamic glazes, balsamic vinegars, some nice special ones from Northern Ireland. There's always a tub of tahini, always. And for me, always Middle Eastern tahini. There's a big difference. If you have Greek tahini, it tends to be thick like peanut butter. Middle Eastern tahini is more pourable. And for me, I always have the Middle Eastern version. So there's always a tub of that. There's always sauces, various condiments, various oils, various honeys. You know, all these things that we collect. So these are some of my favorites. There's obviously other cupboards in this kitchen. You know, there's lots of oats that go through this kitchen. There's chickpeas, there's oat milk. But another favorite of mine is the freezer. I'm a big fan of frozen vegetables and frozen fruit. It takes the pressure off me making sure they get eaten in time whilst they're still good. But also we just like them, especially the fruits. We all have frozen blueberries on stuff. And I particularly like, if I've got lots of chunks of frozen mango, and if you mix that with some natural yogurt or some Greek yogurt and leave it briefly, it starts to freeze some of the yogurt. So you get kind of like a similar experience as if you're having ice cream. I don't eat ice cream. It's all too sweet for me. So it's a kind of version of, which always works nicely. We always have frozen berries. Everyone in this house has frozen berries with porridge or in yogurt. But I really like frozen vegetables, and I'm going to use some of them later. I think they're so useful. And I recently found some really good frozen little mini okra in my local Turkish food store, which really easy to use. So they'll be coming up. And then alongside that is, you know, also some fresh things if we need them. I've always got tomatoes carrots. But I do tend to rely on the freezer more, to be honest. But one thing that always is in our fridge is a lot of Greek yogurt, a lot of plain yogurt, milks, dairy milk for the boys, oat milk for me, just because I like it. I don't have milk that often, to be honest, but I do like to use it in my bread. So that's just a little snippet of the things that I'm looking at and the things that I always have available. And when I'm going to make food or when I'm going to make dough, I will always open my cupboards and kind of peruse and think, what do I fancy putting in something or putting over something, or what needs using up? So these are the typical staples, I guess, that I will have, obviously alongside the flour and all those other things. And there is a cupboard in this kitchen, which is the man cupboard for my husband and son, which is full of things that I don't eat. So that's their domain. We're not going to look in that one. I want to open a cupboard and see lots of healthy choices, which is why I have this lovely selection in front of me. Everything's in glass. I decant everything into glass jars or, glass tubs of some sort. I think it helps things to last longer, but also I like taking them out, especially if things have come in plastic. The same with my spices. I decant everything into glass jars. And every so often I just open the doors and look at it all. Because I like food, I like flavours, I like textures. So that's a little introduction into the things I have in my cupboards. And now we're going to move on to actually cooking some things. So let me move over to my hob.
You're listening to the Foodbod Pod with Elaine Boddy.
Shanna's Sourdough has everything you need to start making beautiful sourdough, from the starter to the roaster and everything in between. Matthew's Churchill Strong White Bread Flour is an extra strong, high-protein bread flour, finely milled from a blend of high-protein hard wheat sourced between the Cotswold village of Churchill and Blenheim Palace. And this is the flour I like. Now, let's do some cooking. So in front of me, I have got some of those grains. I've gone for the spelt grains because they're easier for you to be able to find. And the first thing I want to do is get them going. That's the pan on the stove. I want to get them cooking. So when it comes to cooking grains, my best advice is ignore everything it says on the packet. If you follow packet directions, especially for something like quinoa, you end up with a really mushy, horrible cooked grain at the end of it. So this is how I cook my grains. You'll find this in my first book. You'll find this on my food blog, my original Foodbod one. So what I want is any cup full of the grains. So I'm just putting the uncooked grains into a cup and then putting that into a waiting medium-sized saucepan. So what I'm then going to do is fill the same cup with water. So that is the same cup that I used to measure the grains filled with water into the waiting pan. I'm now going to put that over the heat and leave it up to the boil. So the pan isn't covered, just the saucepan with the water and the grains over the heat. I've got the lid out ready to go. So whilst that is doing its thing, in a pan next to it, a big pan, I'm going to cook some of the frozen vegetables from my freezer that I was telling you about. So these are a standard pack in my local supermarket. They are Mediterranean style roasting vegetables in a basil oil. So this includes char-grilled courgettes, aubergines, peppers and cherry tomatoes. And I use these so often, they're so simple. And I'm just going to pour them into another pan. So that's in the pan next to the grains. And I'm just going to put that again on a medium heat, because all I want to do is cook them through. And I prefer doing this on the hob rather than in the oven. I've found when I have roasted these in the oven, the pieces, the sizes are all too dissimilar. So you get some things cooking through really well and some not. So actually I prefer to do them on the hob, and then you can move them around and keep an eye on them. Whilst that's going on, in another pan, I'm going to start cooking something else. So this is a creation based on a dish called Loubia, L-O-B-I-A, a Lebanese dish that I have in a local restaurant of ours. And it's going to be tomatoes, garlic and green beans, all cooked in olive oil and spices. So I'm starting off with some baby plum tomatoes, and this is a pack of 300 grams fresh tomatoes, and I'm just cutting them in half and adding them to the saucepan, which is sitting on the side next to me. And you could do this with some tin tomatoes, you could do this with cherry tomatoes, you could do it with bigger tomatoes. I like using these because I like the taste of them. And all I'm going to do is put them in some olive oil initially so that they start to cook. So you can start to hear the vegetables sizzling a little bit because they are frozen in the own oil that they were cooked in. You don't need to add anything to the pan. Whereas with these tomatoes, I am going to add some oil so that they don't burn in the pan. There we go. So that's all of them, and I'm just going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil across them all, and then put that other pan over a medium heat. So it's just a standard non-stick frying pan. Got the tomatoes in and the olive oil, and in the pan next to it we've got the vegetables, and then at the end we've got the grains cooking. So we've got lots of nice things going on. Next I'm going to chop up garlic to be going in with this. This is a dish that has liberal amounts of garlic. So that's me just giving the other vegetables a little shake, shimmy and a shake. You could, of course, chop up all of these vegetables fresh. You don't have to use the frozen version. I just think they're so easy. And the size of the pack of the vegetables is 700 grams. And I've just used half a pack. So you can start to hear sizzling now. So the sizzling is the olive oil in with the tomatoes. So what I want is for those to start to break down a bit. In the meantime, I'm going to cut up a couple of cloves of garlic, big fat cloves. So the pan with the grains and the water is starting to show some life. So just peeling the garlic. And we want some nice slices, some nice chunks of garlic. Don't mince it. Actually want to be able to get your teeth into some. If you don't like garlic, you can leave it out. If you fancy putting in some onion, would be good. You could add in some sliced onion if you want to. For me, sticking with the dish and trying to recreate the dish that I had in the restaurant, it was very much green beans, tomatoes and garlic. And again, I'm going to use frozen green beans. You can use fresh ones, top and tail them, do whatever you like. So with this garlic, because it's quite fat, I'm just chopping it in half and then cutting it into slices. Add a lot more garlic if you wanted to. I mean, this is a dish packed full of garlic, and my view is you can never really have too much. So I've gone with 2 fat bulbs there, but you know, looking at that, I think I'm going to do another one. So the grains next to me are starting to bubble, so I want that to come to a boil. Once it comes to the boil, I'm just going to turn it down briefly. Let's just peel this extra clove of garlic, and whilst I'm doing that, let's just give these vegetables a quick stir. So, little stir of these roasted vegetables. They look good. And just a stir of the tomatoes. Oh, they smell amazing. I haven't added the garlic just yet so that it didn't burn, but we're keeping it quite thick, so you can probably add it earlier than normal. So the grains are bubbling and boiling. So all I want to do with them is I want them to simmer for 6 minutes, exactly 6 minutes. And this is a full immersion method, because what's going to happen is once it's simmered for 6 minutes, going to put the lid on, turn the heat off, and let the grains absorb the water. And this is how to have lovely, chewy, separated grains. None of this mushy, overcooked stuff. So at the same time, I'm just going to add these lovely slices of garlic to my tomatoes. That's the garlic going in the pan. Let them start to cook briefly before I add some spices to them. So the vegetables, really we just want them to cook through and be warm enough to add to the salad. So this I will eat as a warm salad and then have the leftovers cold the following day. So it can, or you can make it to eat it specifically cold. It doesn't have to be eaten warm. Oh, olive oil, garlic. Whoa. What is not to love? I mean, I could just eat that as it is, I have to say. And I have done, without adding anything else to it. So I'm adding a couple of teaspoons of ground roasted cumin, a couple of teaspoons of the chili flakes. I'm just going to give that a little bit of a stir. Don't want the spices to get burnt. If your pan is getting dry, add a little bit of water so the spices don't get burnt. But they shouldn't do, because you've got the liquid coming out of the tomatoes, and actually it starts to get a bit nice and gooey and paste-like. So in that pan now, I'm going to tip in some of these frozen beans. So this is a new one to me. Normally I buy the uncut ones, but this is a pack of cut green beans. It's a 450 gram pack, and I'm tipping in about half of it. Just going to stir that round and then let it cook through. The grains are just simmering away and the vegetables are cooking. So whilst this is going on, I'm going to make a sauce.
You're listening to the Foodbod Pod with Elaine Boddy.
Shanna's sourdough for all of your Foodbod sourdough baking essentials.
The perfect pizza needs the right flour. Cotswold pizza flour is an award-winning, finely milled white pizza flour for pizza dough. Perfect for pizza. Matthew's Cotswold flour.
To make a sauce to go with this, and you could eat this straight as it is. I think it's nice to have something to go with it. You could very easily make some hummus, buy some hummus, have some baba ganoush or mutabal, the aubergine version or eggplant, depending what country you're in. I always think it's nice to have something that goes with it. Oh, the grains look good. So I'm just going to mix some tahini with a bit of lemon juice and some water and just make a tahini sauce that's a little bit thinner. You could also mix it with some yogurt. I often mix tahini and yogurt. Oh, fabulous mix. You can use it, like I said, to make hummus. So if you're making hummus, you've got chickpeas, tahini, lemon juice and garlic. But you could replace the chickpeas in it for anything, any vegetable. You could use a cooked sweet potato, you could use some carrots. I've done it with some roasted garlic and tomatoes. In fact, there pretty much isn't anything that I haven't whizzed up with some tahini. Works really well with some roasted cauliflower. You can do it with some spinach, you can do it with some cooked broccoli. Really, you can replace the chickpea element with whatever you fancy. Just don't call it a hummus, because hummus is the word for the chickpeas. So just turning off the grains and putting the lid on so that they can soak up for a bit longer. And you need to leave them about, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. So I'm just going to turn off those roasted vegetables for now in that pan. Turn that back on again when we add the grains, and just give the beans, tomatoes and garlic a stir. Oh, it looks so good. And because you've got moisture coming out of the frozen beans, it's also stopping it from burning in the pan. So we want them really to cook and defrost slowly to take in some of the flavors. So the trick is not to have everything on a mega high heat all the time. So I'm going to take a small bowl. I'm going to put some tahini and some lemon juice. Now lemon juice cuts through the oil a little bit in the tahini, and some water in there. And you could add garlic to this, you could add some herbs to this. It's just a way of lightening up the tahini a little bit, just giving it a stir with a spoon. And this is an oil, tahini is an oil, so it will take a little bit of time for it to mix up and give. I think it's nicer to do by hand. And sometimes when you do it in a blender, to me, you don't necessarily get the desired effect. So when you first start mixing it, as I am, it will look like it's going to separate, and it looks like it's just coagulating. Stops it looking particularly appetizing. But as you keep going, it will mix together, and what you get is it lightens up the color and it makes it slightly smoother. Oh, let's have a try. Oh, it's good. So what you can do is I'm going to add just a tiny bit more water to that, because it's still become quite thick. And if you do this with yogurt instead, it becomes really creamy. Don't just think you can use that for savoury things, because you can use that over anything. Works really well over fruit. Yep. You got to think about it. Tahini is just blended sesame seeds. So there's a massive similarity to peanut butter. So anything that you would do with peanut butter, you can do with tahini. I'm just giving my bean mix a stir. Now this, if I go to the local restaurant, this is what I will choose as a main dish. So I will have the beans cooked like this with the garlic and tomatoes, and it will be served with rice and salad, and for me that's the main course. I love it. So we're just back to our tahini sauce, and that's good. It's a bit more of a pouring mixture, so that will be nice to drizzle over the food. You could use the tahini just direct, because this is Middle Eastern tahini and it has that pouring consistency. You could just use it direct from the tub if you wanted to, but it is nicer to add a bit of lemon juice to it, just cut through the oil a little bit, and some water just to thin it out a little bit. So the beans, tomatoes and garlic are looking good. You will find photos and details of these on our website, foodbodpod.com. Apologies for the lack of video, it's how the day went. So we've got the veg in the other bowl next to it. What I'm going to do is put the grains, the vegetables, and warm it all up again. That will then be served in a bowl with dried barberries over the top, some seeds. You could have a sprinkle of za'atar, you could have a sprinkle of any kind of seeds that you like, a sprinkle of ground nuts, anything as a bit of a finisher.
You're listening to Elaine Boddy's The Foodbod Pod with Matthew's Cotswold flour and Shanna's sourdough.
I'm going to tip those lovely cooked grains into the pan with the roasted vegetables, which have all been cooked and warmed through. Just going to spoon the grains into the pan with those vegetables. I'm just going to cook it all through, warm it all through again. At this point, you could add in whatever you fancy. If you wanted to add in some seeds here, you could. If you wanted to add in some of the za'atar here, it would work well. If you wanted to add in some spices. So that's going to warm through. What you'll notice is I don't add salt to my food. I think there's enough flavour with everything I've used, and personally I leave that to the diner to make their own decision as to how they want their food to taste. For me, I don't need the extra salt. That is just warming through. So I'm going to get some of my beautiful crockery. We've got our tahini sauce here. I mean, really, it's lucky that it's made it this far and I haven't just eaten it all with a spoon. Going to put my bean and garlic and tomato mix, my version of Loubia, into one bowl. And this for me is the meal. Yes, I'm vegetarian, but for me, this is a complete meal. I don't see why it needs anything else to go with it, but it's very easy. You can make this and have it alongside meat or fish, lovely with some eggs. So for me, this is my meal. You know, it's very different when you eat as a vegetarian. You don't start with the meat and the fish and then build on it and add to it. This is the meal. So I don't need anything else with this. I'm just putting the grains and vegetables into a bowl. But you could have this as an accompaniment. This would be great. These dishes would be great alongside some barbecue stuff, because they're lovely warm, but they're just as good cold. So it doesn't matter if they start to cool down. It doesn't matter if you've got them sitting there. And the longer, I think sometimes the longer you have these things waiting, actually, the more that they build their flavours. So we have everything in their bowls. All I'm going to do with the grains, I'm just putting a handful of the dried barberries across the top. I'm going to put some sesame seeds. So what might be nice is that mix that I mentioned earlier that my friend bought for me. So the dried roasted garlic, jalapeno and toasted onion. Bet that'd be nice to put across the top. And then I'm just going to drizzle some of this tahini sauce across the top. And you could leave that until it's served. You can let people add their own, or you can drizzle it across the top to serve it. We've got store cupboard stuff, we've got freezer stuff. Really, really easy, simple things. So let's try. This is the green bean dish. Oh, that is good flavours. And then a bit of my warm grains and vegetables. That is so good, because you've still got the chewiness of the grains, a bit of crunch from the seeds over the top, a bit of dressing from the tahini sauce. I am now going to sit and have my meal of the day. This is my main meal of the day. And on this occasion, David, I know you would love all this and you are missing out. And I'm quite happy not to be sharing it with you. So I hope I've given you some ideas and inspiration from my kitchen. I hope it encourages you to just get out a pan, look at what's in your cupboard and fling it in and see what you can create. These are not things that have been made with a specific recipe in mind, just from years of experience of making things in my kitchen, I guess. And you'll find more things like this on my original food blog, which is just called foodbod.co.uk, because this is my world. This is my kind of food. This is just things that, from things I've tasted, things I've seen, things I've experienced. And it's just, it is just a case of open your cupboards, open your freezer, chuck it in a pan and see what you get. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's a bit different, this one. I'm missing David being here, my producer, but I'm not missing him to have to share the food with. So I really hope that you have enjoyed listening. Do have a look on the website. You will find the photos and whatever details I can to share with you. Remember, if you've got any questions that you can get in touch, please do listen back to other of my pod bites, my shorter episodes, our longer podcasts. And as always, huge thank you to my producer, David Treadway, who will be back with me in my kitchen for our next episode. I am Elaine Boddy. This has been the Foodbod Pod, brought to you with Matthew's Cotswold flour and Shanna's sourdough. Until next time, I'm going to fill a fork and I'm going to fill my face. Bon appetit!